Welcome to the final day of the 45th Mill Valley Film Festival. We're so happy you could be here. We are so happy we made it this far. No, it's been a great festival, and I hope you've been enjoying yourself. The panel that we have today on Variety's 10 Screenwriters to Watch has become a tradition in a relatively short time, just about the last 5 years. We've always valued our partnership with Variety, and I just want to get that through. It's funny how you never can keep these notes open. So we value this partnership tremendously with Variety and everything that we've done with them throughout the years, and particularly with Marina Saval. She has been such a hero in terms of getting this program up and running at Mill Valley and giving it a heart and soul. I'm going to read a little bit about her, but that's only about 10% of the story. All right. Melina is a features editor at Variety, where she covers film, TV, music, and theater. She won 2 LA Press Club Awards and is a board member of the LA Press Club. Prior to joining Variety in 2013, she wrote screenplays for Touchstone Pictures, Walt Disney Films. Her book, The Secret Lives of Boys, Inside the Raw Emotional World of Male Teens, was published in, you're talking from experience there, aren't you? Was published in 2009, and she has appeared as a guest in such programs as NPR's Talk of the Nation, CBS Radio, and The Pat Morrison Show. But again, that's only part of the story. So please give her a warm welcome and a thank you for nurturing this program through at the Mill Valley Film Festival.
Thank you, Mark. Variety really values our relationship with this festival too, so thank you so much. We always love coming up here. So our 10 screenwriters to watch. This is a super fun section that I get to edit and curate every year, and it's so much fun to kind of bring in the next guard of Hollywood screenwriters. And I'm just going to call them up one by one in alphabetical order. We have Joel Kim Booster, Fire Island. Which way? Okay, perfect. Joel Kim. Okay, Katy Brand is not here. We're going to save her award for her. Sarah Conradt, Mother's Instinct is her film. Okay, great. Alex Convery, Soul Man. It's a tight fit. Squeezed in here. Evan Dodson. Is Evan here? Evan. He's doing a remake of Terms of Endearment, which I'm really excited about. Samuel D. Hunter of The Whale. Ximena García Lecuona. Please correct me if my Spanish is not very good. Stefani Robinson is not here. Carrie Solomon. I think I saw her. And Shiwani. Srivastava. Again, correct me if I said that wrong. Does everyone have a seat? Amazing. This is yours. Okay. So, my first question for Joel is, you had written in your profile, or one of the quotes is that you're a self-professed nerd. And having seen your movie, I would love to know what your definition of nerd is and why you feel like you fit that comparison.
Well, I think nerd for me is just a matter of interest, you know, like I'm interested in science fiction and fantasy and the 17 Marvel movies that you guys talked about earlier. So that's definitely it. I know I don't necessarily look the part because I'm way too attractive, but
absolutely.
But it's an inside thing. It's not an outside thing. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, so just to dovetail on that, I would love to talk, because I feel like writers, I'm a nerd. Everyone says they're a nerd. I'm like, what does that even mean? Does anybody here consider themselves a nerd or consider themselves not a nerd? And just a super cool person. Anybody? Evan?
I feel cool every day. I feel like I nerd out about certain things. like I nerd out about K-pop, but I am cool and well, to be fair, K-pop is very cool. Yeah. But I feel pretty nerdy with writing. I feel that a lot of people would say it's a more like, I guess, cerebral job. So I think that would probably be my nerding out. I get to write every day, and I think that's but I think it's pretty cool. But other than that, I would say I'm like the coolest person.
Awesome. You all seem really cool. Anybody else feel nerd tendencies, which I think just kind of means like, holing up writing and reading a lot and like watching TV?
Yeah, I think another word for nerd is just like being passionate about something. And I think that if we want to qualify kind of a weird level of passion, I think probably you could say that all of us feel that way about writing, is my guess, being that we're here. But yeah, like nothing quite like a killer third act really gets you going. Like I think that's kind of the things that I'm sure all of us nerd out about, the specifics of writing, and when things feel like they're clicking into place. I would say that's like as nerdy as it gets for me.
You brought up a good point, actually, because I think that for writers, of course, there's a passion for writing. I don't like, if you're not passionate and compelled to write, you're not going to make it. You're not going to be doing the writing. But as an honest, I'd love to hear honestly if, there are moments where you just get sick of it and you need to take a break and you're not feeling like you want to be writing that day, and maybe you even hate it, because I think a lot of writers go through that. I don't know, like
I saw you looking at me nodding. So I'd take that. Yeah, and I think the thing that I've been letting myself do is on the days when I'm hating it, give myself the day off and like enrich myself with something else. So read, watch something that gets me inspired. And I actually feel that feeling kind of fades away quickly if you own it, listen to it, and just step away from the computer. Yeah. And it's worked for me.
And you also, Shiwani, I mean, you were doing journalism before. You had other jobs before you really committed yourself full on to screenwriting. Are you happier now professionally than you were before?
Yes, absolutely. And my deep, dark secret is I just quit my copywriting job like 6 months ago.
Congratulations. That's huge.
But I am happier professionally, but I think having the other profession made writing very free. Yeah. And that has been a transition into it being what I do full time. Right. So those other careers have informed the writing. I think they helped me create the discipline. I also have to get up and get dressed, and it's my job every day. But there's pressure for sure now. It's a different feeling.
Yeah, no, that is interesting when something that is like your passion, like let's say you're doing photography for many years and people are like, you should do that professionally. Then suddenly it goes from being a passion project to a job, to a gig with a deadline. And I think that can be a big transition. Sarah, Mother's Instinct. So it's a remake of a Belgian film. And it's your first produced film, I think?
It is my first feature.
Okay, so for your first feature, you've got Jessica Chastain and Anne Hathaway starring in your first feature film, which happens to everybody, which is great, not that exciting. So tell me how this came about. And had you seen the original and fell in love with it? Or
I did. Yes. And it's been a long journey. So what I've learned over the years is you can have a career in screenwriting and just not get anything made for one reason or another. And often, through no fault of your own or the quality of the work or whatever, there are just so many factors that go into actually getting a movie made. Somebody can leave a studio who was championing your project, and then it's not the thing that the next person wants to do, so it goes on a shelf. A director picks another project, and so then it goes on the shelf or whatever. So
it's like that movie Night at the Museum in the Smithsonian where the statues come alive. It'd be like if all the scripts could talk. They're like on their shelves.
That's right. So it was, I've been fortunate enough to work with some really wonderful people, and this one went all the way, which was a thrill. And I actually just got to see, the first cut last week. So, and I'm very excited, and I feel very honored to have, written something that these two phenomenal actors are very passionate about, and they loved it too. So they were looking for something to do together. So this appealed, and then when I saw it, I loved the dynamics of the relationship and the twists and turns, and I won't say anything more because I don't want to give anything away.
Yeah. Wait, I have to sneeze, but I'm like in the middle. I don't know. It might not happen, but we'll see. So. Is it? But okay. So I've seen the original. Is it different than?
What's amazing is what you might end up seeing might seem very, very similar to the original, but just know that it went for 2.5 years. It went all over the place to kind of hone and distill into what it is. It's really interesting to kind of look at that journey and what in the end. It became, and
no, it's very, very exciting.
And that's fun that you saw the original.
Yeah. I went to film school and we sat through things.
Yeah.
Alex, you did what so many of us do during the pandemic. You're like, what am I going to write about? I don't know. And you started watching The Last Dance doc on ESPN, and from that you decided this would make an amazing movie. It was. Well, now it's called Soul Man, but what was it called before? It was like Air Jordan. Air Jordan. What I'm really interested about is it had been made. It was a documentary, and you watched it and loved it. And so, who are you, to say, I'm going to make this now a movie? Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's an interesting kind of thought process. Mm-hmm. And why did you think it could work and know it would work?
Yeah, well, it's a very specific kind of 5-minute segment of the doc about Nike and how Michael Jordan ended up at Nike. You were talking earlier about kind of some days not having the passion and feeling like you're stuck in a rut. That's kind of where I was. I mean, so much of our time is spent not writing. I was doing rewrites and pitches and chasing, the next paid assignment. And I really was just looking to get back in the final draft and have fun with something. You were talking with Andrea earlier about having that project that's kind of just for you. And that's what this was for me, really. It was just... I had a feeling in my gut that there was something there, and I loved the main character, and it was just a joy to write. And so any throwaway time I would have, I would just work on it to kind of keep, that passion alive. And I think probably not coincidentally, that's, I hear so much when people read the script, like, it's just such a fun read, and it's because I had fun writing it. And I just, that stuff translates.
Did you have to get permission prior to writing? Or
I should have.
After?
I should have.
You did it all afterwards.
This is one that you don't tell, your reps that you're working on, because they would say stop immediately. And I had gone through this in the past. I wrote a script about Stan Lee and Marvel Comics, and for that reason, it didn't get made, because someone has his life rights. But nevertheless,
that did fly across my desk, I think, last year or something. Pitching you as a writer.
Yeah, I mean, and good things still came from it. The movie never got made and maybe never will, but, it ended up being a good sample for me and got on the blacklist. And again, it's just one of those things that it's like, I was passionate about the idea and I love the story. And when you have those things, you kind of have to chase the inspiration when it's there.
Are you really into sneakers?
That's the funny thing is I'm really into sports and just the business of sports and the culture of sports. So, everyone's like, you're writing these sports movies. I don't really look at Air Jordan as a sports movie. There's like one scene of basketball in it, and Michael Jordan's only in a couple scenes. It's really about... It's about someone betting on themselves. Both Sonny Vaccaro, whose idea was to go all in on Michael, and then Jordan himself. He should have gone to Adidas. He should have gone to Converse. So there's just something human about it that I think was really relatable.
I mean, but are you hoping to get free sneakers on her?
That's been one of the benefits.
Sneakers are huge.
I have a lot more Jordans than I ever thought. Yeah.
sneakers are giant.
Yeah.
They're like, okay. So, Evan, you, again, this happens to everybody. You were the youngest person ever to be on the blacklist, I think, for your script.
Yes.
You were still in college at USC.
Yes.
In the film program? Were you in the screenwriting program?
Yeah, I was in the screenwriting program. It was my sophomore year.
Do you know Tom Abrams? Do you
Yeah.
know? Okay. So yeah. So you're in college and you're on the blacklist, so your classmates must have hated you. No. Or how did that go down?
It went down really well, actually. No, I swear. I really swear.
I went to grad school at USC. Are you sure?
Well, I was undergrad, so everyone was a lot less bogged down.
All right. Okay.
So it was. Everyone was super, super kind about it. It happened. I wrote the script sophomore year, and I got on the blacklist my junior year, and. Everyone was super supportive. It really was, because I guess since we had spent so much time together, at least like 20 of us get into the program, everyone was kind of like really good friends anyway. So it was, if they were shady about it, not to my face. Right. So if that was the case, it really didn't matter. But everyone to my face was very nice.
Cool. That's sweet. But so like what I love about this is it's like, okay, so you're doing this remake in terms of Endearment, which is one of my favorite films of all time, a film we saw in the theater opening day. I think it was like Christmas Day, 82 or 80, whatever. So, and, doing with possibly Oprah Winfrey, possibly attached in the Olympia Dukakis, Shirley MacLaine, complete, because I'm old, so I forget names. Shirley MacLaine role is so fun and so interesting. Where are we at that? Like, where is this project right now? Are we? So
currently, well, I finished my job, and it's Lee Daniels wants to direct the movie, right. And I think what's happening right now is trying to get all the financing together because it was at Paramount, and I think they're trying to also go in with like MGM as well. Right. I think it's just mainly just trying to put together all of the money, and then when that happens, then solidify the cast. Okay. But yeah, my job is done.
No, that's
for now until they call me back.
Yeah. I bet that's going to be really good. And then we can just briefly, Two Butterflies with Viola Davis still attached, I believe. Yeah. So you wrote that also while as an undergrad?
That was the blacklist script. That was the sophomore year script. Yeah. Okay. And that was like crazy because when I wrote it, that was my dream. Like woman to play the part, and never did I think, and I think it was something that you said or something that Andrew said earlier. I never wrote it to, in my mind, ever get made. It was just because I loved these characters, and I wanted to see two black women on a road trip.
It's about two sisters, correct?
Yeah, it's about two sisters who go on a road trip. I just want to see two older black women in a road trip because my favorite movie was like Little Miss Sunshine at the time, right. and which is still my one of the top 5 favorite movies, and I just loved these characters, so I just wrote it with just having a good time, and and I wanted to see women like the women in my family on screen, and it was writing with that kind of heart in mind, and I never in a million years thought that someone was gonna want to buy it, and never did I think that Viola Davis was actually going to want to be in the movie, and then working with Juvie has been phenomenal. Juvie and Amazon, it's just, and Rainforest Entertainment, just like the best partners ever. So
do you guys all feel, I kind of feel like those are the projects that see the light of day, the ones that you kind of like don't expect to ever see the light of day, but it's hard to train yourself to not have those expectations. I don't know. Sam, you're a playwright, and
so I'm the least cool person.
No, you're the cool. But when you wrote The Whale, as it was a play.
Yes.
And then
it was produced here actually.
It was produced in Marin. And so, did you ever have the expectation that you would adapt it as a film?
No. I mean, I didn't even know that Darren Aronofsky, the director, had seen the play. I got a random call. The play premiered in Denver initially in 2011, and then it was done in New York in 2012 at Playwrights Horizons, and then I got this call out of the blue saying Darren Aronofsky wants to meet with you. And I was, at the time I was like 30, and it was one of my first kind of meetings in the screenwriting world, and so I remember I just had no idea what to do. I think I pulled out a notebook and took notes like a dope. So we've been talking about it for 10 years. And I've done screenwriting since then. I've mostly done plays, but But yeah, I mean, I think I've become a better writer, so I think I'm glad it took 10 years to make, because it needed that time for me to sort of figure it out. But it is a pretty faithful translation. I mean, it's a pretty, if anybody saw it here in Marin, it's structurally identical. It's the same.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, also, this is clearly also something you never could have predicted 10, 12 years ago. But, for Brendan Fraser, it is they're calling it a comeback.
Yeah.
Well,
he never went away.
And he never went away.
Yeah.
So it's like, we use those terms at magazines. I'm like, but he never went anywhere.
Yeah.
But what a thrill for you. And to see him kind of embody this role that you had created, what was that experience like for you?
It was incredible. I mean, I had known over the years that Darren had been looking at exhaustive lists of people and met with a lot of people, but I really wasn't involved with that. So really, Brendan was the first name that Darren brought to me. And what we did is we did a reading of the screenplay in a little theater in the East Village with Sadie Sink as well, actually, who is marvelous in the film. And it was just like 5 minutes. I had seen a lot of different people do that role over the years. And there was something that Brendan brought to it, which was just so incredible. That, for those of you who saw the screening, I mean, he can hold love and despair at the exact same time, which is what life is. And he brought that even in that reading that was, I think, 7 days before the pandemic hit. And then we shot it in the middle of the pandemic, too. And it was a really rare experience, I think, as a screenwriter for me, because I was on set the entire time, and we also did a 3-week rehearsal process beforehand that I was really embedded in. And it's kind of a dream scenario, I think, as a playwright moving into movies for the first time.
Yeah. Ximena, so Anything is Possible. It's kind of like a coming-of-age relationship sort of story.
Yeah.
What was your, inspiration? Was it based on your own high school experience at all, or where did you?
Not really. I couldn't really get any in high school. Never had a boyfriend or anything, or a girlfriend. It came from, I think I was like considering my transition at the time. So I was like, oh, like what's out there? Like, what's the reference? And I think the only media I could find was like these very tragic depictions of transgender people, like the Danish girl, like she finally like gets her bottom surgery and dies immediately. Yeah. Like, what else? And I would find these like posts by teenagers online, like Reddit, YouTube. And they're just like trans, but like having a good time, like experimenting with dating, and it wasn't that dark. And I was like, oh, this is what I need to write more, to see a little bit, but to write more than anything. No, I'd like to remind myself that it doesn't have to be dark. Like it can be fun and funny and romantic, and no.
Yeah, I remember because the end of The Danish Girl, it's so depressing.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of like when you're talking about like representation on screen,
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's important that not everything that has to do with weighty topics or needs to be like suicidally depressing.
Yeah.
I think that can probably send the wrong message to young people or even older people watching it. So cool. And let's see. I want to make sure everyone gets one personal question before we open up. So Carrie, okay. So Carrie's next to you. So Carrie, what I found interesting is when you're working on the Untitled Margot Robbie's Ocean 11 project. Does it have a name yet? Or is it just
I have lost track of what I'm allowed to say and what I'm not. So
Exactly.
I don't know. Like maybe I have a name for it. I don't know if anyone's gonna.
Okay. All right. So it's the Ocean's 11 project. But what I thought was interesting is in order to prep for writing that, to research, you bought an encyclopedia set of crime. So
It was
now
actually
I'm
an
wondering,
accident.
Is it? Oh, you didn't mean to order it.
I thought I was ordering one book. 12 came. They're sitting under my desk. There's still no place for them in my home.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you read one, or?
Oh no, I definitely. I mean, to say I read a set of encyclopedias would be a stretch. I certainly skimmed them. I referred to them many times. It actually ended up being quite helpful, but it was an accident.
Yeah.
I want to be clear about that. Yeah.
And so, but in terms of like research and stuff, because I think, you know, as a writer, right, I think that what you want to write, right? You got an idea in your head, you want to sit down, you want to get it on paper and like just have it done. But the research part, I don't know, this is something that we can open up to everybody. I mean, juggling, how you could research forever, right? You could literally be like, I'm still researching, and it's a great way to not commit to writing on the page too, but you're still writing. So I was just like, from you, and also, let's start with you. When did you know, like, okay, I've done enough research, it is time to get on the page? And then I've been interested to see what other people think as well.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, especially because I mostly have written romantic comedies or buddy comedies, and this was certainly out of my wheelhouse at the time as far as I was concerned. And so I really had no idea what the research process was going to look like. Actually, interestingly enough, the heist stuff came with time and research, and I kind of figured it out as I was going. I mean, we spent a year outlining it basically, and making sure that, you know, it was as airtight as we could possibly make it before we went to script, which of course all fell apart as soon as we had a draft. But I actually felt like the research within the Oceans franchise was more valuable to me than within like the world of crime. I've now read all of those scripts and watched those movies more times than I could verbally express. And I've spent just so much time studying the way that action's written, like transitions were written, the way that POV is switching constantly in those movies, and like stylistically, I wanted to make my own movie while also paying homage to that, as well as the 1960s original Ocean's 11. And so honestly, I feel like I learned more in my research process from the existing franchise as a writer than I did about how to write this script specifically than I did from a crime perspective. And I think once I had read and watched those movies enough, I was like, let's try it and meet a bunch of people on the page and know that I'm going to throw it all out, but you got to start at some point. And then as I was going, I'd be like, boy, I don't know how they're going to get that off the boat. And would end up being like, cancel. And then end up, you know, researching boats for 6 months. So, and I still don't know much about them. So it really became a writing research process for me, more about like how the hell was I gonna do this, and still, you know, ending up with like a 160-page first draft that's been winnowed down to a good 153 at this particular moment. That was more my research that got me going rather than the logistical crime stuff, because it's like they say about Grey's Anatomy, they would just write like doctor stuff. And I was doing that at one point. I was like, crime, like keyhole, garbage, like figure it out later, like get to the characters and get to the story. And so that was kind of my path with that.
Shiwani, what about wedding season? What kind of research did when writing that, or did you just flow?
I went to about 100 Indian weddings in my entire life.
That's what I read. You went to Now, my question is, in your family, or did you have to get invited to other? Did you crash weddings?
Everybody's family. There's no crashing. You could all come to an Indian wedding right now.
So that's what I'm super interested. Like, that's a lot of weddings and a lot of gifts. Do you have to bring gifts?
You could show up without one. I mean, wouldn't be recommended. But no, I mean, it's funny. Like, this script also evolved over 10 years. When I started it, there wasn't a model for how a movie like this would get made, because Netflix was just getting off the ground. But at that time, it felt like I was going to a wedding every other weekend. I was engaged to someone who's not South Asian, who's here, hi, and looking at what it was like to be on the outside, trying to come into a culture that basically takes over all wedding planning to like 200%. So I was living that, but then 10 years later, you know, when I was doing the rewrite on it for Netflix, I had twins who are now almost 9 at the time, but I could see it more from the parents' point of view and like what this wedding actually means if you kind of take a step back culturally, ritualistically, like the history behind it. So it was actually kind of nice to be able to look at it from both of those lenses. So I guess I lived the research. I guess you can say that.
No, that sounds super fun.
Yeah.
Bring it back here. So Fire Island, I watched that like a few times. it like came out at a time where I don't remember if I was still sick in bed with COVID or my kids were, or everyone was. I don't remember, but it was like the perfect medicine for that particular juncture. And then I watched it recently again when this feature came out, and it's so much fun, and it's so we talk so much about LGBTQ representation, and I also don't think this was a film that had an overt message. And I think if you create movies that have an overt message, they generally don't work. They feel very preachy. And this is just like a human story. And I don't know if you want to add anything to that, just about like, they're just characters who happen to be what they are.
Yeah, I went into it very much in the same sort of headspace as Ximena did about her movie. Is I was so sick of seeing movies about queer people that was all trauma porn, ultimately. And I think we need to come up with our own Bechdel tests type system where it's like 2 named queer characters and neither of them die, and or get attacked or get sick or anything like that. And so for it to be, a successful movie. And so that's really what I went in. Really, I wanted to write something that I wanted to watch, ultimately. And that was something joyful and kind of stupid. But
and you're in the movie, and you're the star of the movie, and so it's like, I don't know, was that always going to be were you willing for anybody else to play that part?
I would have done anything to get the movie made, obviously. I don't know that the only other thing that I think, the only reason to recast me would have been to get a name, and there aren't a lot of gay Asian names out there other than the other one that I cast in my movie. So I really sort of painted them into a corner by making it 2 gay Asian leads. So there wasn't a lot of options other than me.
It's really funny because it's funny. It's smart and makes complete sense. And I was having this conversation with Gina Davis, because her whole thing is, diversity and inclusion, whatever. And she's always saying, I remember like people are always like, raising their hands. Gina, how do you get more diversity in script? She's like, write specifically in the script, make it, like an Asian, he is Asian and gay, or make it this is a woman who is, a certain, like, you have to be very specific in the writing, which is interesting because that wasn't always the case 15 years ago. It wasn't like that. They would just take a character and make it who they wanted. And do we think Hollywood is starting to pay a little bit more attention to the specificities within the script? We have a long way to go, but I think there's at least movement in a positive direction.
I think part of it for me is that you're still not seeing a lot of incidental diversity in casting. Like usually when you see a diverse cast, the story is in some way about the diversity of those characters. And I think when we'll know we've really reached a new sort of level when we just see characters that look like us, and the story has nothing to do with that. It is just a wedding comedy, and it happens to have a diverse cast, but that's just sort of where I am.
Yeah, it's almost like, you have to still write like a crowd gathers, half of which are women, it's true. You have to like be like specific. I don't know. I'm just curious. I don't want to beat this like a dead horse, but the research component, I'm just kind of curious, like how, I don't know, did anyone else have to do, you had to do some research, and how do you know when you're done?
Well, for me, research should always service character. And once you know the character, their arc, and the journey they're going to go on, the research will always be there. So you can always go back to it. But, if you're researching purely for plot, then, your character's kind of just on train tracks then, and they're kind of predestined to end up where the research tells you they should, and that's not good dramatic storytelling. So really, once you know the character, once you know, the start of their journey, to me, that's when you start. And when you hit a wall, like Carrie was talking about, then you go back to the research and you figure out, the twists and turns you can make. But it should all kind of go back to servicing your protagonist and antagonist.
Can I just say one caveat, which is that I was also doing completely open-ended creative research from a completely blank slate. It was not at all based on fact or reality, and it wasn't even inspired by. And I'm sure when you see the film, you'll say, yeah, this did not come from reality at times. But I think working off of a true story or real people is like a totally different ballpark of pressure and research that I was very lucky to, I think, avoid, because it's easier, I think, to start when there isn't actually an end to the story that you're writing yet.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anyone else? Also, Carrie, you've got Richard LaGraveness, who's directing Family Affair.
Yeah, it's not going to be called that, but that was kind of our standing name in Atlanta.
He's an incredible director, and was he your first choice? I mean, if did you ever envision it?
It's actually a crazy story that I think I can tell. No, Richard's amazing. I became very close with him in our time making that movie, and I think he's brilliant. I mean, P.S. I Love You is one of the most beautiful and like heart-wrenching movies ever, and it's a huge staple of like my high school years. And he's also just a lovely person. Actually, originally, because that movie is kind of a love letter to Notting Hill, that movie was supposed to be directed by Roger Michell, who passed away. And so he was attached to direct it, and he died very much in the midst of that coming together, which was a really interesting and tragic and strange event for him, for that movie. For my first movie, it was a whole strange thing. But then Richard came along, and I couldn't have been happier to make the movie with him. He's fantastic.
I did not know that. Wow, that's quite a story.
Yeah, it's a weird story.
Yeah, my gosh.
So sorry.
We do a fun thing where in the profiles we talk about your influences, and everyone wrote theirs, but I don't know if anyone else. So I'd love to just go down. We can start with you and talk about your influences and artistic inspirations.
Yeah, my influences that I listed are similarly multi-hyphenates, like myself. Issa Rae, Michaela Cole, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Lena Dunham is up there as well, and people who sort of wear many different hats and are creating stories that sort of center themselves. I guess that makes me a little bit of a narcissist, but yeah, who are really sort of have their hand in all sort of areas of the process of making their art.
Sarah?
I'm sort of a square peg, I think, because I think at my heart I'm probably a novelist. But so my influences are really mostly literature and poetry and early Jane Campion. An Angel at My Table is still one of my favorite films. So the journey in Hollywood has been very interesting for me. But it seems like it might be working now. So
are you going to be writing a novel?
I hope so. We'll see. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, there are so many. I put Tony Gilroy. Michael Clayton was probably the most important script I read. I think really because you're taught in film school a very specific mode of screenwriting, which is you can only write what the camera sees, right? And the screenplay is just a blueprint for a film product. But reading the script for Michael Clayton, it just changes that entire worldview. It flips it on its head, and you're really in the character's head, and he's describing a lot of things that aren't on screen, but it's all to service the emotion and the character. And that really unlocked a kind of a different mode of screenwriting for me, which, kind of changed everything.
Cool. Evan?
Yeah, mine were Michael Arndt, Michaela Cole, and Lena Waithe. Lena Waithe and Michaela Cole, just because they just create phenomenal characters, and that's what I just love to do. I just love, even doesn't matter how small the story is, character is always the thing I just enjoy the most. It can be about two people sitting in one room, and I just enjoy having them talk to each other. And I think those two do that extremely well. And Michael Arndt was because I actually was a painter before I became a writer, and I was like art school since I was in 6th grade. And when I took like one of my first major screenwriting classes, the professor gave me Little Miss Sunshine and said, I think this is like more like your style. I think you would.
Was that a professor at USC?
No, professor at School of Visual Arts.
School of Visual
Arts. Which I went before USC. And she said, this is, I feel this is very much like you. And I read it and I was like, this is and it completely changed my life. I was like, this is what I want to do. And So that's why Little Miss Sunshine will always be like the top movie, because it gave me a career, gave me a direction that was not painting, because I did not want to be homeless. And that's what I thought I was going to be while I was a painter. So, yeah.
You might have been.
I might have been, but we're here now.
You still can be. There's hope.
So far,
You're
so
young,
good.
yes.
So far, so good.
Samuel, what about you?
I mean, I think early on, as like a kid in North Idaho in the late '90s, it was like literary.
Where are you from
stuff.
in Idaho?
Moscow, Idaho. It's in
Okay,
North
I
Idaho.
know,
It's
yeah.
where the whale said.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a lot of like literary stuff, like Faulkner and Joyce, and and then like early on in college, it was like Edward Albee, but I think really throughout my career, my greatest influences have been this sort of cohort of playwrights that I was rising up with. In the like early teens, like Annie Baker and Brendan Jacobs Jenkins and Amy Herzog, many of whom have started to work their way into screenwriting as well.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Amazing. Ximena.
In the article, I wrote that my influences were like early 2000s teen movies, like Mean Girls, The Girl Next Door, like raunchy stuff like that. I think my influences come from a lot of places, though. I am really influenced by internet culture. It's like finding weird stuff online, creepypastas, kind of like internet, like internet lore. You know, I feel like the creativity there just gets way more twisted and goes in directions that you would never see in more structured things like movies and novels.
Carrie.
My influences are always evolving. That's kind of an annoying thing to say, but having to write this Oceans movie now, I think they changed in the process as well. Originally, I would say I was, like a Nora Ephron stan, and as so many people are. And I, have been really influenced by people like Katy Silberman, who's also writing in that genre right now and doing it excellently. Andrea Savage, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, all of those women. And then it kind of started to evolve towards like Eric Roth, who I think like similarly to me calls himself an intuitive writer. And as a person who doesn't like to outline and had to write a heist movie, that was a challenge. And Richard LaGravenese has, become one of my greater influences, knowing him personally on this Netflix movie we just wrapped on. He was our director, but he's also a writer. And I think he reminded me about grounding things and honesty. Ted Griffin, I think, like I said, I read that Ocean's 11 script front to back maybe over 100 times, and that's an airtight script. Even though I didn't actually know what happened in the heist until maybe like 6 months ago. I think it's an immaculate script. It's all over the place, but those are some.
Cool. Shiwani.
Yeah, I guess for me, when I think most back to when I was growing up, what made me love movies, and it was Nora Ephron for sure, and the witty banter. And I heard Kumail Nanjiani once in that movie Big Sick was a big influence for me, talk about how he just wanted to show like Muslims having fun, and that's how I felt about my immigrant parents. And when I cite Amy Sherman Palladino and Gilmore Girls as a big influence, because this was a family that loved each other, talked shit together, and this was my family, but I never saw them represented that way. It was always, like ruling your children with an iron fist. And so when I saw Mindy Kaling first come on the scene and incorporate sort of this witty banter, I was like, oh, it's time. So those were really my three influences, is just wanting to show my family in this what I thought is a true light.
We are out of time. Everyone's got an award. I'm not sure if there's. They're really nice awards.
Not nearly as
They
dangerous
are.
as
They're
Andrew
not. They're
does.
rounder. So I don't know if they want a photo op, but thank you all so much for being here
Thank you.
and for being a part of this. I think there's a photo op you want. Okay.